I still think about that night whenever I hear a knock at my front door after sunset. My name is Arjun, and this happened when I was 19 during my first year of college. I was living in a small rented house just outside the campus with two roommates, but on weekends I often stayed alone because they both went back to their hometowns. It was one of those quiet Saturday nights where everything feels slightly too still. No traffic outside, no voices from neighboring houses, just the occasional hum of a ceiling fan trying its best against the heat. I was lying on my bed scrolling through my phone when I got a call from someone I barely expected, Mason. We weren't close friends anymore, just people who'd shared classes in school. We still talked occasionally, mostly memes and random check-ins. I answered. "Hey," I said. His voice came fast, a little strained. "Are you home right now?" "Yeah," I replied. "Why?" A pause. Then, "I need a favor." That immediately set off a small warning in my head. Mason didn't usually ask for favors. He explained that he was driving back from a trip with a mutual friend, Neil, and something was off with him. He said Neil had been acting strange the entire ride, talking nonsense, laughing at nothing, then suddenly going silent for long stretches. "I just need somewhere for him to stay tonight. Just one night. I can't take him home like this." I frowned. "Why can't he go to your place?" "He can't," he replied quickly, too quickly. "My parents are home. It's complicated." I sighed and sat up. I don't really want someone I don't know staying over. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mason said something that changed the tone completely. "Please, he's not okay right now. I just need him off my hands for a few hours." Something in his voice didn't sound casual anymore. It sounded urgent, almost desperate. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "I'll give you my vape pen, the one you wanted." That was a stupid detail to change my decision, but I was 19 and not exactly wise about consequences. After a short hesitation, I said yes. "Fine, bring him over." There was relief in his voice. "Thank you. I'll be there in 20. I didn't think much of it after that. I assumed Neil was just drunk or overly tired, or maybe had taken something but didn't agree with him. I made the mistake of not asking anything else. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across my living room wall. I met them outside. Mason was in the driver's seat. Neil was in the passenger seat. The moment I saw Neil, something felt off. He wasn't drunk in the usual sense. There was no stumbling, no slurred speech. He just looked disconnected, like his attention wasn't fully anchored to the world in front of him. His eyes flicked around slowly, landing on nothing in particular. Mason got out quickly. He handed me a small vape pen without a word. Then he grabbed Neil's shoulders. "Hey," Mason said quietly, leaning in. "You're going to stay here tonight, okay? Just stay calm." Neil nodded. Too slowly, too mechanically. "Okay," he said. Then Mason looked at me. "Just keep him inside," he said. "Don't let him wander." And then, almost without waiting for my response, he got back into his car and drove off. I stood there for a second, holding the vape pen, watching the taillights disappear. Then I turned to Neil. He was already walking toward my front door. I followed him inside. At first, I tried to be polite. "Bathroom's down the hall," I said. "You can sit in the living room if you want." He didn't respond. He just looked around slowly, taking in the space like he was mapping it in his head. Then he asked, "Are the doors locked?" I blinked. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" No answer. He just stared at me. That's when I felt it again, that uncomfortable sense that something about him didn't match the situation. I walked toward the front door just to reassure myself. Locked. Back door. Locked. I turned back. Neil was still standing in the same place. Then, suddenly, he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too deliberate, like someone had practiced it. He raised one hand slightly, like he was testing the air, then lowered it again. No explanation, no context, just that motion. I forced a small laugh. You good?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Can I get water?" "Yeah," I I said quickly. Kitchen. I led him down the narrow hallway. As I opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle, I noticed him standing near the counter drawer, the one with the utensils. He was watching it, not me, the drawer. Slowly, he reached for it. I don't know why I reacted so fast, but I did. I stepped forward, grabbed his wrist, and shut the drawer before he could open it fully. He didn't resist, he just looked at me, then chuckled softly, like I had interrupted a joke only he understood. My heart started beating harder. Something was wrong here. I handed him the water without looking at him too long. "We should just go sit," I said. He nodded. We walked back toward the living room, but as we passed the front door, he stopped and looked out it for a long moment, then whispered something under his breath. I didn't catch it fully, but it sounded like, "Not yet." I turned to him. "What?" He looked at me like nothing had happened. "Nothing," he said. And then, for the first time since he arrived, he smiled normally. "I want to go outside," he said. I should have said no. That thought didn't fully form in my head at the time, but it's the one that keeps coming back whenever I replay that night. Neil stood near the front door like he was waiting for it to become an option. Not pacing, not fidgeting, just watching it in a way that made the room feel smaller. "I want to go outside," he repeated. I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's late, you should just stay in for the night." He didn't argue. That was the strange part. No pushing, no reaction, just a slow blink like he was processing something I said but didn't necessarily accept. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. We went toward the laundry room that led to the side driveway door. I remember being hyper-aware of every sound, the hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even the way my own footsteps sounded too loud. At the door, I opened it and stepped aside. "Just go for a walk around the house if you want, but don't leave the property." Neil stepped outside first. He paused on the small concrete step, and for a second, he just stood there, looking out into the dark yard. Then he turned his head slightly and said, almost casually, "You locked everything, right?" I nodded. "Yeah." That was a mistake, because I said it without thinking, without checking. Neil didn't say anything else. He just walked forward into the yard. I stayed at the door for a moment, watching him move slowly toward the side of the house. Then I stepped back inside and closed it. The second the lock clicked, something in my gut tightened. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Nothing. I exhaled, trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. Then I heard something that erased that feeling immediately. A soft click from inside the house. Not the front door, not the side door, from deeper inside. I froze. The sound had come from the hallway. Slowly, I moved forward, every step careful, until I could see down the corridor. The hallway was empty, but the closet door near the kitchen was slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it like that. I walked toward it, heart already hammering. Halfway there, I heard a faint sound behind me, a soft exhale, right behind my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was still empty, but now I could hear movement again. Light footsteps, not rushed, not clumsy, controlled, moving away from me, toward the front of the house. I backed up slowly, grabbing my phone. No signal. Of course. I whispered, "Neil?" No answer. Then I heard it again, that same soft smile in his voice earlier, now echoing faintly from somewhere in the house. "Are all the locks locked?" My skin went cold. I moved faster now, checking the front door. Locked. Back door. Locked. But the kitchen window above the sink. It was open. Just a crack. Enough for someone to reach through. I slammed it shut and locked it immediately, breathing heavily now. That's when I heard something from the living room. A chair scraping. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find in the kitchen, a metal pan. Stupid, I know, but my brain wasn't exactly thinking logically anymore. I stepped into the living room. Empty, but the TV remote was on the couch. I didn't leave it there. Then the hallway light flickered once and stayed on. I turned slowly. Neil was standing at the far end of the hallway again, just watching. Same expression, same calmness, like he hadn't moved at all. Except now there was something in his hand, a small object, metal. He lifted it slightly. A key. My house key. I don't remember dropping mine. I definitely didn't give him one. You checked the locks, he said softly. It wasn't a question. My voice came out weaker than I wanted. Where did you get that? He tilted his head slightly. You didn't check all of them. That's when I heard something outside. A knock from the front door. 3 slow taps. I didn't move. Another knock. Then a voice. Mason. Hey, it's me. I almost ran to the door out of instinct, but something stopped me. Because Neil didn't react at all. He was still standing in the hallway, holding the key, watching me. Mason knocked again. Open up, we need to get him out. I looked between the hallway and the door. Neil, I said carefully. Mason's here. Neil didn't respond. Instead, he took one slow step forward and smiled again. Not the fake one, not the normal one. The same one from earlier. Too wide, too calm. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Did he come alone? Another knock, louder this time. Open the door. I don't know what I was supposed to do in that moment. All I knew was that both sides of my house suddenly felt wrong, and Neil was still standing there holding a key he shouldn't have had, watching me decide which one of them I trusted more. I was 26 when I finally understood how much that night had shaped me, but the memory itself goes back to when I was 12. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever really happened, the kind of place where you left your doors unlocked during the day without thinking twice. That evening, my parents had to go out for a family function. My older brother, who was 18 at the time, was supposed to stay with me. His name was Luke. He acted responsible most of the time, but that night he was in one of his moods. He told me he'd just be gone for a couple of hours and made me promise not to tell our parents. I agreed without thinking much about it. I liked the idea of having the house to myself anyway. At first, it felt like freedom. I made myself snacks, turned on the living room TV, and picked a horror movie I probably shouldn't have been watching at that age. The house was too quiet in between scenes. Every sound felt exaggerated. The refrigerator clicking on, the floorboards settling, the wind brushing against the windows. Halfway through the movie, I started noticing how differently a house feels when you're alone in it at night. It stops being just walls and rooms. It becomes something you listen to. Every time the movie hit a loud moment, I'd flinch harder than I should have. I kept glancing toward the hallway that led upstairs, expecting to see movement at the top of the stairs. Nothing ever came, but that didn't help. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned the TV off and rushed upstairs to my room. I tried telling myself I was just tired, that I was overreacting because of the movie. I brushed my teeth quickly in the bathroom that connected my room to my parents' bedroom, then locked myself in my room. To distract myself, I turned on my old console and started playing a game, something mindless, something loud enough to fill the silence. It worked for a while. Time slipped by without me noticing. At some point, I lost a match, got annoyed, and decided I was done for the night. That's when I felt it. A vibration. Then a sound. The front door closing. I froze. I assumed it was Luke coming back. I stayed in bed listening. At first, I felt relieved, but then I noticed something wrong. He wasn't acting like himself. Usually, when Luke came home late, he'd go straight upstairs, quick steps, door opening, silence. That night was different. There were sounds downstairs, slow movement, uneven footsteps, then a dragging noise, then nothing, then something again. I sat up in bed, staring at my door. Minutes passed and the sounds didn't stop. If anything, they became more deliberate, like someone was exploring the house instead of just walking through it. I went to my window and looked outside, expecting to see Luke's car parked in the driveway. It wasn't there. That's when the fear shifted. I didn't have a phone. I was too young. There was no way to call anyone without going downstairs, and that felt impossible. I went to my bedroom door and checked the lock. It was one of those weak interior locks that only gave a false sense of security. I knew it wouldn't stop anyone if they really tried. That's when I realized I couldn't just stay there. My eyes moved to the small crawl closet built into my room. It wasn't meant for hiding, it was just storage. But it was the only place that felt even slightly safer than being out in the open. I opened it quietly and slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind me. It was cramped and dark, but I could hear everything from there. Downstairs, the sounds continued. Then they got closer. A floorboard creaked directly outside my room. I stopped breathing. The door handle shifted, slowly. Then the door opened. I pressed myself tighter into the corner of the closet, trying not to make any sound. Footsteps entered my room. Not rushed, not random. Controlled. Someone was walking around my space like they belonged there. I heard drawers open, then close. Something being placed down, something being moved. Every sound felt intentional. I remember thinking very clearly that I was hearing someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Minutes passed like that, maybe longer. Time didn't feel normal anymore. My entire body hurt from staying still. At one point, I heard something dragged across the floor. It scraped slowly, like furniture being shifted or something heavier being pulled. I covered my mouth with my hand to stop myself from making any noise. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the movement stopped. Silence filled the room, but I didn't move. I waited and waited. I don't know how long I stayed in that closet. It felt like hours. Then, faintly, I heard a voice from downstairs. "Hey, where are you?" It was Luke. Relief hit me so fast I almost pushed the closet door open, but something stopped me. The voice didn't sound right. It was close to his, but not quite, like someone trying to imitate him. A few seconds later, I heard another voice, closer now. My name, coming from inside the house. That's when I knew I couldn't trust what I was hearing. Then I heard footsteps again, moving away from my room this time. Eventually, everything went quiet. I stayed inside the closet anyway. I didn't know if it was safe or if I'd just missed something. I don't know how long I stayed there before I finally heard the real sound that broke everything open. A car door outside. Then another. Then my brother's voice calling my name, sharp and confused. This time it was real. Luke was back. I pushed the closet door open so fast I almost fell out. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Not relief, confusion, then anger. "What are you doing in there?" His voice was shaking. I tried to explain, but my words came out broken. I pointed downstairs, told him someone had been inside. That's when everything got worse, because when we went downstairs together, the house wasn't how I remembered it. And whatever was in my room wasn't finished yet. The days after that night didn't feel normal in any way. Even when things went back to routine, nothing actually felt like it settled. My parents tried to act like it was over, like it was just some intruder who got scared off and ran. The police basically said the same thing after a second round of questioning. No entry points were confirmed, no fingerprints found, no clear signs of forced entry. Just possible trespasser, likely opportunistic. That was the official version, but I couldn't accept it that easily. Every night after that, I started checking the house in a way I never did before. I would look at the windows twice, then again. I started noticing small things I had never paid attention to. A chair slightly moved, a cabinet door not fully closed, a faint draft in places that never had one before. My parents said I was imagining it because I was scared. Maybe they were right about some of it, but not all of it. What bothered me most was my sister's room. No one had used it that night. She was still away at college, but I kept thinking about the figure I saw at that window before everything happened. I asked my dad once if he had checked that room properly. He got annoyed and told me the police cleared it thoroughly. Still, I found myself standing outside her door sometimes, just listening. A few days later, something small but unsettling happened. My mom found a footprint near the back window. It wasn't clear enough to make anything out properly, just a faint outline and dust on the sill outside. The police came back again, looked at it, took photos, and said it could be old. Wind, animals, anything. They didn't treat it like new evidence. But my dad didn't look convinced this time. I noticed that. After that, he started locking everything earlier in the evening. Not dramatically, just quietly changing habits. He also started checking the yard more often at night, like he was expecting something he didn't want to say out loud. Then came the part I never told anyone for years. About a week after the break-in, I woke up again in the middle of the night. Same room, same silence. But this time, I didn't see anyone. Instead, I heard something very soft outside my window. Not a knock, more like fabric brushing against the wall. I stayed completely still. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was nothing. Wind, maybe a branch. Then I heard it again. A slow, careful movement, like someone shifting their weight on something outside. I didn't get up. I didn't scream this time. I just listened. And then I heard something I'll never forget. My name. Not shouted, not whispered dramatically, just my name spoken very quietly, like someone was testing whether I was awake. I didn't respond. I couldn't. A few seconds passed, then nothing. Absolute silence. I stayed awake until sunrise that morning. When I finally told my dad about it later, he didn't dismiss me immediately. He just went quiet. That was worse than him arguing. That same day, he went outside and checked the awning below my window again. He didn't tell me what he was looking for, but I saw him staring at the edge of it for a long time. When he came back inside, he said there was nothing there, that he never said there was nothing unusual. After that, things slowly went back to normal on the surface. The police stopped coming, my mom stopped talking about it, my sister came back home a month later and acted like it was just a weird story that happened while she was gone. But I never fully let it go. Even now, years later, I still think about how someone got inside the house without leaving clear signs. I think about how they knew my name. I think about how they watched me long enough to wait until I was alone. And I think about the fact that the night it happened, my dad went out hunting unexpectedly and came back later than usual. No one ever really explained that part properly. It always got brushed off as a coincidence, bad timing, nothing to connect. But sometimes, when I replay everything in my head, it doesn't feel like separate events. It feels like something was already moving through our lives before we ever noticed it. I never saw that figure again. No one did. But every now and then, I still check the upstairs window before I go to bed, even when I know I shouldn't.